Hi, I'm Brian Medway. Welcome to this little session or series of segments related to a thing that we're doing called Training for Trainers, which is, by the way, a stolen title from a book by Steve Smith and Ying Kai. One of the reasons why we're doing this is because for some time we've had this passion to be able to do something that we've never seen done. There's a long story to the back of this, but I'm not going to bore you with that now. But we have this idea that it was Jesus' intention for his disciples to make disciples, and for those disciples to make disciples. It wasn't his intention to produce, 10 heroes each generation who'd go around the world having large meetings, as wonderful as they may be. But his intention was for something to be put inside of somebody. Those 11 blokes who stood on the mountain with him at Galilee, and he said, I want you to go and preach the gospel to every person, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I've commanded you, and I'm with you. I've authorized this, all authority is given to me. That the idea wasn't that he would have this large organization that would send gospel emails to everybody, but something would be inside. When the Holy Spirit came on those guys, something would be inside them that would both authorize them and equip them to be able to share the gospel, whether it was with one person or 3 people or 10 people or 1,000 people or, whatever it was on the day of Pentecost, 3,000 people believed. So I think we need to recapture that, because I live in a nation where hardly any gospel preaching goes on compared to the number of people who need the gospel. The gospel is the power of God for salvation. The gospel is. Not an idea, not a building, not a program, the gospel. And so that gospel needs to be proclaimed, declared, shared, whatever you want to call it. And most of us feel incapable of doing that. We live amongst, you could live probably, if you're an average person, we've done a few surveys, you could live in a set of spheres where there might be up to 100 or 150 people who have never heard the gospel and don't know Jesus. And you're living in those spheres. You'll go to work there, you live there, whatever, and yet you don't feel competent, confident, capable. You don't want to do this, it's scary. And even if you try and do it, you think you're going to do a bad job, so you accept all that rubbish about those who've got gifts and those who've got gifts. When the ministry that Jesus commissioned us is about proclaiming the gospel to everybody. And the assumption was that everybody would be doing this. All 11 disciples were expected to do this. If you accept that gift idea that a few people are gifted to evangelize, the rest of us are gifted to be safe and secure inside of some little Bible study or some church meeting or something like that, that's so pathetic biblically. It just doesn't add up at all. There's no warrant for that. None, zero, zilch. So we want to invent this little training idea, and we got this from a guy called Bill Smith up in Newcastle last year, along with Steve Addison and Tim Shire and others. And I found a bunch of people to hang out with who are not convinced that we can't do this. Please hear what I've just said. Who are not convinced that we can't. Like most of the church, who are convinced that we can't. Who are convinced that we can't find a way for ordinary people to be disciple makers. Not just disciple makers, but disciple makers of disciples who are disciple makers. Or, to use Steve and Ying's idea, training trainers. Why is it not possible for that? Well, they've actually proved it. In this book, I don't know whether you can read this, but right there it says that in 10 years, Ying Kai and his wife Grace started a disciple multiplying movement that saw 1.7 million. These are people who, these are conservative numbers, 1.7 million people who were baptized as believers, who belonged to churches, who not only became disciples but became disciple makers, and they can track up to 18 generations of churches that planted churches that planted churches, and even more generations of disciples who've made disciples who've made disciples. Now in the Bible we see this represented very clearly for us in 2 Timothy, where Paul says, listen Timothy, I'm first generation. I gave you something, and something was inside of you because of what I've given. You need to give that to faithful people. That is, the people who will also give that to others. So we have Paul, Timothy, faithful people and others. We have 4 generations, and the experience of these people has proved that if you can produce something that will go 4 generations, then it is very hard to stop. Think about that. We're having trouble getting things to start. But when you get something that doesn't depend on your personality or your program, just think of somebody that you disciple who then makes another disciple, who then makes another disciple. That fourth person doesn't need to know you. They don't need to depend on you. They don't need to depend on the atmosphere you create or the charismatic personality you have, because they've come to know Jesus because of somebody who was 3 from you, because of somebody who was 2 from you. So, that's the idea of this. So, this is about training. It's about creating capacity, skills. So it's not just about information. And so we're going to do a lot of training in this course. We're going to practice things, and we're going to practice things that we haven't done that we can do. Not just make one giant leap and one small step for man and one giant leap for humanity. We're just going to make one small step, and then another small step and another small step. That's how all good training operates. No piano student is expected, to be able to play Beethoven's 5th Symphony, in the 3rd lesson. Takes them years, but they do. They practice it. So we're going to do that. I don't care how long it takes, but we're going to try and do it. First of all, we're going to train people not so that they can just learn and do it themselves, but we're going to train them, and the quality of the training, or the way we're going to train, is so that you can teach somebody else. And so in this way, we will keep things to a simple minimum. And some of them will sound simplistic, and some of it will sound a bit rote, R-O-T-E. But we're just going to develop skills by enabling it to be seen, understood, practiced, implemented, and then trained with others. We're going to see some relationships as really core. We're going to gather together with people who want to do this. We're going to make ourselves accountable to them. We're going to make ourselves accountable to learn from some of them and to teach others. So we're going to have a set of relationships, and we'll be learning from some, and we'll be practicing on others, and we'll be imparting to others. So these will be the relationships that will be important to us. And we're going to maximize collective and personal responsibility. So we can build confidence-based training. That is, if you do the training, you'll come from being not confident to being confident. Not because you're a world beater, you might be, but because you'll have had good training, you'll have had good practice. That practice will have gone on somewhere where you can make mistakes and everything. This is like the footy team. They go to practice and they go to practice. They make mistakes at practice. They make a lot of mistakes at practice. Because when they get on the footy field, they want to minimise the mistakes. So they make all their mistakes, if possible, at practice. And we're going to do all that too. And we're going to be doing a lot of things just by trying to break down some of those defaults that we have. And some of those defaults are that you're just here to listen and like, and then go away and not be changed. We're going to say at the end of each time, what have you learned? What will you do because of what you've learned? And who will you tell about what you've learned? So I'm looking forward. We've got a little booklet here, and we're going to be looking at different pieces of this through these training sessions. They're all just going to be 10 minutes or so, just so they can be easily accessed and so forth. But this is really a supplement to somebody sitting with somebody and going through this and figuring out how to do this and figuring what we need and crying out to God, because at the end of the day, He is the one who equips. We are just enabling that equipping. But we're looking for transformation inside of you, so that what you don't feel confident in right now, you will feel confident in. You'll not only feel confident, but you'll feel the sense of transformation that the Holy Spirit brings, because you have decided to be obedient to something that is in the heart of Jesus. You have decided to become the tangible expression that's something that pumps in Jesus' heart of love for lost people. God bless you.